The autumn sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Millbrook, Wyoming Territory, in 1882. Samuel McKenna adjusted his worn leather hat as he stepped down from his weathered wagon, the wooden wheels creaking against the packed earth. At 42, Sam carried the weight of solitude in his shoulders, broad from years of ranch work, but bowed slightly as if carrying invisible burdens. The general store's bell chimed as he pushed through the door, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee beans, tobacco, and leather goods. Martha Henderson looked up from behind the counter, her kind eyes crinkling with concern. "Afternoon, Sam. The usual supplies?" "Yes, ma'am. Flour, coffee, beans, and—" He paused, running calloused fingers along the edge of the counter. "Maybe some of that good whiskey you keep for special occasions." Martha raised an eyebrow. Sam McKenna wasn't a drinking man, barely touched alcohol except for medicinal purposes. "Everything all right out at the ranch?" Before Sam could answer, the store door burst open with such force that the bell nearly flew off its hook. 3 men stumbled in, rough-looking drifters, with the kind of hollow eyes that spoke of hard living and harder choices. The largest one, with a scraggly beard and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, dragged something behind him. Not something. Someone. A girl, perhaps 14 or 15, with tangled auburn hair and clothes that had seen better months. Her wrists were bound, and though she tried to maintain dignity in her posture, Sam could see the fear flickering in her green eyes like a candle in a storm. "We need supplies," the scarred man announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to taking what he wanted. "And we're a bit short on cash." Martha's hand moved instinctively toward the shotgun she kept beneath the counter. "Then I suggest you find work and come back when you can pay." The man laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. "Oh, we got payment." He yanked the girl forward. "Irish stock. Good for cooking, cleaning, other things. Worth more than your whole store." The girl's chin lifted defiantly despite her circumstances. "I'm not stock, you ignorant." A backhand sent her stumbling, but she didn't cry out. Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach, a mixture of rage and recognition. He'd seen enough cruelty in his 42 years, during the war, on cattle drives, in the darker corners of frontier towns. But this struck something deeper. "The girl's not for sale," Sam said quietly, his voice carrying the calm that comes before a storm. The scarred man turned, sizing up Sam's lean frame and weathered hands. "Wasn't talking to you, rancher." "You are now." Sam stepped closer, and though he wasn't the largest man in the room, something in his bearing made the 3 drifters shift uncomfortably. "Martha, how much for a bottle of your finest whiskey?" "Sam, what are you?" "How much?" Martha's voice was barely a whisper. $5. Sam reached into his vest pocket and placed a gold coin on the counter. "There's 10. Keep the change." He looked directly at the scarred man. "I'll trade you a bottle of genuine Kentucky bourbon for the girl." The silence stretched like a bowstring. The girl stared at Sam with a mixture of hope and terror, unable to determine if she was being rescued or simply sold to a different kind of hell. One of the other drifters, a thin man with nervous eyes, tugged at the leader's sleeve. "Come on, Jake. We ain't had decent liquor in weeks, and she's been nothing but trouble." Jake studied Sam carefully. "You sure you want damaged goods, rancher? She's got spirit, but spirit can be broken." "The whiskey's worth more than you'll get for her anywhere else," Sam replied evenly. "And it's immediate. No haggling, no searching for buyers." The girl found her voice. "I won't be bought and sold like cattle. I'd rather—" "You'd rather what?" Jake snarled. "Die out here? Because that's your other option, girl." Sam watched the fear flicker across her face again, followed quickly by resignation. She was calculating odds, just as he was. The difference was, she had fewer options. "What's your name?" Sam asked her directly. She hesitated, as if giving her name might make the transaction more real. "Catherine O'Brien." Irish, as Jake had said, probably from one of the immigrant families that had tried to make it west and failed. Sam had seen plenty of them. People fleeing poverty in the old country only to find different kinds of hardship in the new one. "Catherine O'Brien," Sam repeated, tasting the name. You understand what's happening here? She nodded slowly. You're buying me from these men. No, Sam said firmly, causing everyone in the store to look at him in surprise. I'm paying for your freedom. What you do with it after that is your choice. Jake laughed harshly. Pretty words, rancher, but a deal's a deal. You pay. She's yours to do with as you please. The deal is for the whiskey, Sam corrected. Nothing more, nothing less. Martha had been quietly wrapping the bottle in brown paper, her hands shaking slightly. She placed it on the counter, and Sam slid it toward Jake. There's your payment. Jake grabbed the bottle, examined it, and nodded to his companions. Pleasure doing business. He looked at Catherine with something that might have been pity. Good luck, girl. You'll need it. The three men left as quickly as they'd arrived, taking their stench of unwashed bodies and moral decay with them. The store felt larger somehow, but also more fragile, as if the walls had been stretched thin by the tension. Catherine stood perfectly still, her bound hands clasped in front of her. What happens now? Sam pulled out his pocket knife and carefully cut the rope around her wrists. The hemp had rubbed her skin raw, and he noticed her trying not to wince as circulation returned to her fingers. Now you decide, Sam said. Martha, you know anyone in town looking for help? Someone who could use a cook or housekeeper. The Reverend and Mrs. Morrison might. No. Catherine's voice was sharp. I won't be a charity case, passed from hand to hand. She looked directly at Sam. You paid for me. That makes me your responsibility, whether you like it or not. I told you. I heard what you told them, she interrupted. But I also heard what they said. A deal's a deal. I may be many things, Mr. McKenna. Samuel McKenna. Mr. McKenna. I may be many things, but I'm not stupid. You've got a ranch, which means you need help. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, and I'm not afraid of hard work. Her chin lifted again with that same defiant pride. I'll earn my keep. Sam studied her face, the determined set of her mouth, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she held herself despite everything she'd been through. She reminded him of something, though he couldn't quite place what. It's a hard life out at the ranch, he said finally. Isolated. Lonely. And I'm not. I'm not good with people. Haven't been for a long time. Neither am I, apparently, Catherine replied with the ghost of a smile. Seems we're well matched. Martha cleared her throat. Sam, are you sure about this? Taking in a stranger. She's not a stranger anymore, Sam said quietly. She's Catherine McKenna. The words hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Catherine's eyes widened. McKenna, if you're going to be part of my ranch, you need a proper name. Catherine O'Brien died the moment those men dragged you in here. Catherine McKenna is who you choose to be from now on. For the first time since entering the store, Catherine's composure cracked slightly. Not with tears, but with something deeper, a recognition of possibility she hadn't dared hope for. Why, she whispered. Sam picked up his supplies, shouldering the heavy sack of flour with practiced ease. Because everyone deserves a chance to start over. And because, he paused at the door, looking back at her. Because maybe we both need rescuing. As they walked toward his wagon, Catherine fell into step beside him. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting new shadows across the dusty street. And for the first time in months, Samuel McKenna didn't feel quite so alone. The ride to Sam's ranch took 2 hours through rolling hills covered in yellowing grass and scattered stands of pine. Catherine sat beside him on the wagon seat, her silence not uncomfortable but observant, taking in the landscape that would become her new home. The McKenna ranch appeared gradually as they crested a small rise, a collection of weathered buildings nestled in a shallow valley with a creek running along one side. The main house was modest but solid, built from local timber, with a wide front porch that spoke of lonelier evenings spent watching the sunset. A barn, several outbuildings, and a corral completed the picture. It's not much, Sam said, the first words he'd spoken since leaving town. It's more than I had this morning, Catherine replied practically. As they approached the house, a dog emerged from the barn, a grizzled Australian shepherd with one ear missing and a permanent limp in his left hind leg. He barked once, more from duty than alarm, then approached the wagon with a careful dignity that spoke of advanced age and hard-earned wisdom. "That's Blue," Sam said, climbing down from the wagon. "He's older than Sin and twice as stubborn, but he's good company." Catherine extended her hand for Blue to sniff, and after a moment's consideration, the dog allowed her to scratch behind his remaining ear. "Hello, Blue. You're a handsome fellow, aren't you?" Sam was pulling supplies from the wagon, but he glanced over at the interaction. Blue was particular about people. It had taken the dog weeks to warm up to Sam when he'd first arrived at the ranch 5 years ago. Yet here he was, already accepting Catherine's attention. "The house isn't fancy," Sam said, leading her up the porch steps. "Built it myself after I bought the land. It's got 3 rooms, main room with a kitchen, my bedroom, and a small room I use for storage. You can have that one. I'll move the things out." The front door opened directly into the main room, which served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all in one. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a simple wooden table and 2 chairs positioned nearby. The kitchen area was functional but sparse, a wood-burning stove, shelves lined with basic dishes, and a washbasin beneath a window that looked out toward the creek. What struck Catherine most was how clean everything was. She'd expected a bachelor's quarters to be unkempt, but Sam clearly took care of his space. The floors were swept, dishes were clean and stacked neatly, and though the furnishings were simple, they were well maintained. "It's a good house," she said, running her fingers along the smooth surface of the table. "Solid." Sam seemed surprised by the compliment. "Kitchen's got everything you need for cooking. I usually keep it simple: bacon, beans, biscuits. But if you want to make something more—" "I'll make do with what's available," Catherine assured him. "Though I should warn you, I learned to cook from my grandmother in County Cork. She had strong opinions about proper meals. Irish cooking. Irish grandmother, but she married a man who traveled the world. She could make anything taste good, even during the worst times." Catherine's voice carried a note of sadness. She used to say that a good meal could make any place feel like home. Sam showed her to the small room that would become hers. It was cramped but had a window facing east, which meant morning light. The space currently held tools, spare harnesses, and other ranch equipment. "I'll have this cleared out before nightfall," Sam promised. "I can help move things." "No need. You should rest, get your bearings." He paused in the doorway. "Catherine, I want to make something clear. You don't owe me anything. You're free to leave whenever you want. I'll even give you money for stage passage if you decide this isn't for you." She turned from where she'd been examining the window latch. Where would I go? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Sam had assumed she might have family somewhere, friends, some other option. But looking at her now, he realized she was as alone in the world as he was. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then I guess I'll stay," she said simply. "At least until I figure out what comes next." That evening, Catherine prepared their first meal together. A simple stew made from beef jerky, potatoes, and wild onions she'd found growing near the creek. She'd also managed to turn flour, water, and a bit of lard into decent biscuits, despite the limitations of Sam's kitchen. They ate in relative silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of strangers. Instead, it felt like 2 people who had grown accustomed to solitude learning to share space. "You said you built this place yourself," Catherine said finally. "Where did you come from before?" Sam set down his spoon, considering how much to reveal. "Pennsylvania originally. Fought in the war, then drifted west looking for something different. The war was hard on everyone. Some more than others." Sam's tone suggested that particular topic was closed. "What about you? How did you end up with those men?" Catherine's jaw tightened. "My parents died of fever last spring. I was staying with relatives in Kansas, but they—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They decided I was more burden than help. When those men offered to take me west to find work, my uncle thought it was a good opportunity. He sold you. He convinced himself he was helping me." Her voice carried more sadness than anger. People tell themselves a lot of stories to avoid feeling guilty. After dinner, Sam moved his stored equipment out of the small room while Catherine washed dishes. When she finished, she found him setting up a simple bed frame and mattress. "It's not much," he said, straightening the rough blankets. "It's perfect." Catherine stood in the doorway of what was now her room, the first space that had belonged to her in months. "Sam, can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Why did you really buy me from those men? The truth." Sam was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I had a daughter once. She'd be about your age now." He met Catherine's eyes. "Those men, they reminded me of people who took everything from me. I couldn't let them take you too." "What happened to your daughter?" "Fever. Same as your parents. Her and her mother both, 3 years ago." Sam's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "I came out here to get away from the memories, but you can't really run from them," Catherine finished softly. "No, you can't." They stood there in the doorway, two people bound together by loss and circumstance, each recognizing something familiar in the other's pain. "I'm sorry," Catherine said, "about your family. I'm sorry about yours too." Outside, Blue barked once at something moving in the darkness, probably a raccoon or possum investigating the chicken coop. The sound broke the moment, returning them to the present. "You should get some rest," Sam said. "Tomorrow I'll show you around the ranch properly, introduce you to the routine." "Sam," Catherine called as he turned to leave. "Thank you. For the name, for the room, for everything." "Thank you for the stew," he replied. "It's been a long time since I've had a proper meal." After he'd gone to his own room, Catherine sat on her new bed and looked out the window at the star-filled sky. For the first time in months, she felt something approaching safety. Not happiness. That seemed too much to hope for yet, but the possibility that tomorrow might be better than today. In the main room, Sam sat by the dying fire with Blue at his feet, staring into the embers. He'd told the truth about having a daughter, but not the whole truth. Mary had been older when she died 17, with her mother's laugh and her grandmother's stubborn streak. And she hadn't died of fever. Some truths were too heavy to share with someone who already carried too much pain. But as he listened to Catherine moving quietly around her new room, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope that the empty spaces in his life might someday feel less vast. Winter came early that year, arriving in November with a fierce blizzard that trapped Sam and Catherine in the house for 3 days. By the time the storm passed, they had established a rhythm of shared meals, divided chores, and comfortable silences that spoke of growing trust. Catherine proved herself capable in ways that surprised them both. She could mend harnesses as expertly as she could bake bread, and she'd figured out how to repair the pump handle that had been giving Sam trouble for weeks. More importantly, she had opinions about how the ranch should be run, and she wasn't shy about expressing them. "You're losing money on those cattle," she said one morning in December, standing at the kitchen window and watching Sam check the stock in the north pasture. "How's that?" Sam asked, pulling on his heavy coat. "You've got good breeding stock, but you're not managing the herd properly. That bull, the big one with the white face, he's too old to be servicing all those cows. You need younger bulls, and you need to separate some of the cattle by breeding cycles." Sam paused, one arm in his coat sleeve. "You know cattle? My grandfather in Ireland was a cattle dealer before the Troubles drove him out. He taught me to read bloodlines and breeding potential." Catherine turned from the window, her expression matter of fact. "That old bull's throwing weak calves. Half your herd will be worthless for selling to the big ranches. I've been ranching for 5 years." "And you've been making the same mistakes for 5 years," Catherine replied without malice. "Just because you can keep cattle alive doesn't mean you're running a profitable operation." Sam should have been offended, but instead he found himself curious. "What would you do differently?" Catherine poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the table, clearly prepared for a longer conversation. "First, you replaced that old bull with 2 younger ones. That costs money up front, but it pays off in better calves. Second, you improve your grazing rotation. You're overusing the south pasture and underusing the creek bottomland. The creek floods every spring, which makes the soil richer. You graze there in late summer and fall, after the flood risk passes. The cattle will put on more weight, and you'll preserve the grass in your other pastures. Sam found himself sitting across from her, drawn into the discussion despite his initial skepticism. You've been thinking about this. I've been watching and reading. Catherine gestured toward a stack of agricultural journals Sam had never paid much attention to. Mrs. Henderson at the general store gets these from back east. There are new techniques, better ways of doing things. Over the following weeks, Sam began to see his ranch through Catherine's eyes. She was right about the bull. The old Hereford was past his prime, and the calves from the previous spring had been smaller and weaker than they should have been. She was also right about the grazing patterns, the need for better fencing, and a dozen other improvements he'd been too set in his ways to consider. But the real change wasn't in ranch operations. It was in the house itself, which had transformed from a place Sam simply slept and ate into something approaching a home. Catherine had made curtains from fabric she'd convinced him to buy in town, and she'd rearranged the furniture to create distinct areas for cooking, eating, and relaxing. She'd also established routines that gave structure to their days: coffee at dawn, dinner at sunset, and an hour each evening when they sat by the fire and talked. "You miss it, don't you?" Catherine asked one night in January. They'd been discussing her idea to start a vegetable garden in the spring, but something in Sam's expression had grown distant. Miss what? Having a family, people to plan for, to build something with. Sam stared into the fire, choosing his words carefully. "I thought I was done with all that. After Mary and Elizabeth died, I figured I'd just work the ranch until I couldn't anymore, then sell it and move on." "What changed?" "You did." He looked at her then, and Catherine saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Not romance, but a different kind of affection. The look of someone who had found an unexpected companion. "You make me think about the future again, about making plans that extend beyond next season." Catherine felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "You gave me a future when I didn't have one. Seems only fair I should help you see yours more clearly." The conversation was interrupted by Blue's sharp barking outside. This wasn't his usual alert bark, but something more urgent. Sam was on his feet immediately, grabbing his rifle from above the mantelpiece. "Stay inside," he told Catherine, but she was already reaching for the shotgun he'd taught her to use. "If there's trouble, you'll need backup." Through the window, they could see torches moving in the darkness. At least 4 men on horseback, approaching the house at a deliberate pace. Sam's jaw tightened as he recognized the lead rider. "Jake Morrison," he muttered. Catherine's blood went cold. She recognized the name, the scarred man who had sold her to Sam 2 months earlier. The riders stopped just outside the circle of light from the house windows. Jake's voice carried clearly through the cold air. "McKenna, we need to talk." Sam opened the door, but kept the rifle visible. "Nothing to talk about, Morrison. Our business was concluded." "See, that's where you're wrong." Jake's horse pranced nervously, sensing the tension. "Turns out the girl was worth more than we thought. We've had people asking questions, offering good money for information about her whereabouts." Catherine stepped up beside Sam, the shotgun steady in her hands despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I told you I'm not for sale." Jake's laugh was harsh in the cold air. "Everyone's for sale, girl. Question is just the price." He looked at Sam. "We're prepared to be generous. Give us the girl, and we'll cut you in for a percentage of what she brings." "The answer is no." "You sure about that? Because we're not the only ones looking for her. Word gets around about a pretty Irish girl living on a lonely ranch. Might attract the wrong kind of attention." Sam stepped fully onto the porch, his rifle now clearly aimed in Jake's direction. "Are you threatening me?" "Just stating facts. Lot of dangerous men in this territory. Hate to see something happen to a decent rancher over damaged goods." The words hung in the freezing air like a challenge. Catherine could feel Sam's anger radiating from him, like heat from a stove, and she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Sam," she said quietly, "they're not worth it." But Sam was thinking about his daughter Mary, about Elizabeth, about all the times he'd failed to protect the people he cared about. His voice, when he spoke, was deadly calm. "Jake Morrison, you and your friends have exactly 1 minute to get off my land. If I see any of you near my ranch again, I'll shoot first and ask questions later." "This ain't over, McKenna." "Yes, it is." Sam stood on the porch until the torches disappeared into the night, then turned to find Catherine watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked. "You called me family," she said softly. "When you were talking to them, you said they'd have to go through family to get to me." "Did I?" Sam seemed genuinely surprised by his own words. "You did." Catherine smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it reached her eyes completely. "Thank you." As they secured the house for the night, checking locks and loading extra shells into the shotgun, both Sam and Catherine understood that something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer a rancher and a rescued girl sharing a house out of convenience. They had become something new, a family forged not by blood, but by choice and mutual protection. Outside, Blue settled onto the porch with a contented sigh, his one good ear alert for any sound that might threaten his people. In the barn, the cattle huddled together against the cold, unaware that their future was being planned by a woman who understood their value better than the man who owned them. And in the house, Sam and Catherine sat by the fire making plans for new bulls, for spring planting, for improvements that would take years to complete. Plans that assumed they would face those years together as family. Spring arrived with a rush of snowmelt that turned the creek into a torrent and transformed the brown landscape into brilliant green almost overnight. Catherine's predictions about the flooding proved accurate. The creek bottomland was indeed rich soil, perfect for the hay crop she'd convinced Sam to plant. The new bulls had arrived in March, young Hereford stock purchased with money Sam had never expected to spend on long-term improvements. Catherine had supervised their introduction to the herd with the confidence of someone who'd been born to the work, and already the cattle looked healthier, more vigorous. "You were right about everything," Sam admitted one morning as they watched the bulls settle into their new routine. The grazing, the breeding program, even the garden. Catherine's vegetable garden was thriving in a plot she'd chosen near the kitchen window. Neat rows of beans, squash, tomatoes, and herbs that would transform their simple meals into something approaching cuisine. She'd also planted flowers along the front porch, claiming that a house needed beauty as much as it needed function. "My grandmother always said that wisdom isn't about knowing everything," Catherine replied, tying back a wayward tomato vine. "It's about admitting what you don't know and learning from people who do." "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. She also would have liked you." Catherine straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. She believed that the measure of a man wasn't what he had, but what he was willing to share. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a wagon approaching. Sam's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle. He'd remained vigilant since Jake Morrison's visit, and strangers still made him nervous. But this wagon flew a white flag and carried a lone driver, an elderly man in a dark suit and clerical collar. "Reverend Morrison," Sam called as the wagon drew near. The minister was Jake's father, but thankfully nothing like his son. "Samuel, Catherine." The Reverend climbed down from his wagon with the careful movements of a man whose joints protested every motion. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Catherine assured him. "Would you like some coffee? I was just about to put a pot on." "That would be most welcome." As Catherine prepared refreshments, Reverend Morrison settled onto the porch with Sam, his expression troubled. "I suppose you're wondering why I'm here," the old man said. "Crossed my mind. It's about my son, Jake." The Reverend's voice carried a weight of shame that Sam recognized, the burden of loving someone who consistently disappointed you. "He's been asking questions around town. About Catherine, about your arrangement." Sam's jaw tightened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest he hasn't given up on his plans for her." The Reverend accepted a cup of coffee from Catherine with grateful hands. "I'm afraid Jake sees your protection of Catherine as a temporary obstacle rather than a permanent solution." "What exactly are you saying, Reverend?" Catherine asked, settling into a chair beside Sam. "I'm saying that my son is planning something. I don't know what, but I know him well enough to recognize the signs." The old man looked between them with sad, tired eyes. I came to warn you, and to offer what help I can. What kind of help? Sam asked. The legal kind. Reverend Morrison reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. I've taken the liberty of drawing up adoption papers. If Catherine is truly a member of your family, as you've claimed, then she should have the legal protections that status provides. Catherine stared at the papers as if they might bite her. Adoption. It would make you Samuel's legal daughter, the Reverend explained gently. No one could claim ownership of you or force you into any arrangement against your will. You'd have the full rights and protections of any citizen. But I'm not a child, Catherine protested. I'm nearly 16. The law doesn't specify an age limit for adoption, Sam said quietly. He'd been thinking about this same issue for weeks, wondering how to formalize Catherine's place in his life without overstepping boundaries. The question is whether it's what you want. Catherine looked at the papers, then at Sam, then out at the ranch that had become her home, the garden she'd planted, the house she'd helped improve, the life they'd built together over the past 6 months. What would it mean practically? She asked. It would mean you're my daughter in the eyes of the law, Sam replied. You'd inherit the ranch if something happened to me. You'd have my name permanently, not just as a courtesy, and no one could ever again claim you belonged to them. It would also mean, Reverend Morrison added delicately, that any future marriage would require Samuel's consent as your legal father. Catherine couldn't help but smile at that. Given that Sam scares off any man who looks at me sideways, I don't think that changes much. I do not scare off men, Sam protested, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what Catherine meant. You do. Remember when Tom Bradley tried to ask me to the church social? You spent 20 minutes discussing the various ways accidents could happen on a ranch. That was just conversation. Sam, Catherine reached over and took his hand, her expression growing serious. Are you asking me to be your daughter? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither had dared voice before. Sam had been careful never to assume too much about their relationship, and Catherine had been equally cautious about her place in his life. I'm asking if you want to be, Sam said finally. Not because you owe me anything, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I'd be honored to call you my daughter. Catherine felt tears threatening for the first time in months, not tears of sadness or fear, but of overwhelming relief and gratitude. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want that more than anything. Reverend Morrison smiled, the first genuine expression of joy Sam had seen on the old man's face. Then let's make it official. The ceremony was simple, signatures on legal documents, witnessed by the Reverend and blessed with a prayer for their new family. But as Sam wrote Catherine McKenna in the space for his daughter's name, he felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 3 long years. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Catherine broached a subject that had been weighing on her mind. Sam, Dad. She paused, testing the word. Dad, there's something I need to tell you. About why those men really want me back. Sam felt his stomach tighten. What about it? It's not just about money. My uncle in Kansas, what he gave me to those men, he told them I was promised to someone, a man in California who'd paid for a wife. Catherine's voice was steady, but Sam could hear the fear underneath. That's why Jake thinks I'm worth so much. There's a bounty on me. The revelation hit Sam like a physical blow. A bounty. $500 for my safe delivery to San Francisco. Catherine looked out at the darkening landscape. That's why Jake won't give up. It's more money than he's ever seen. Sam was quiet for a long moment, processing this information and its implications. $500 was indeed a fortune to men like Jake Morrison, enough to make them persistent and dangerous. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked finally. Because I was afraid you'd decide I was too much trouble, that you'd send me away to keep yourself safe. Catherine. Sam turned to face her fully. You're my daughter now. That means we face trouble together, not by running from it. Even if it means putting yourself in danger? Especially then. Sam's voice carried the absolute certainty of a man who had finally found something worth protecting. Besides, you're forgetting something important. What's that? That man in California isn't getting a wife. He's getting nothing because Catherine O'Brien, the girl who was sold to him, doesn't exist anymore. Sam smiled, and Catherine saw in his expression the same fierce protectiveness she'd glimpsed the night Jake first came to their ranch. There's only Catherine McKenna now, and she belongs to nobody but herself. As if summoned by their conversation, Blue lifted his head and growled low in his throat. Both Sam and Catherine tensed, listening to the night sounds, but after a moment the dog relaxed. "Just a coyote," Sam said, but he made a mental note to check the rifle tomorrow. "Dad," Catherine's voice was small in the darkness. "Yes, thank you. For everything. For giving me a name, a home, a family. For making me feel like I matter." "You do matter," Sam replied firmly. "You matter to me, and you matter to this ranch. You've made it better, made me better." They sat in comfortable silence as full darkness settled over the land. Inside the house, a lamp glowed warmly in the kitchen window, casting golden light across the porch where father and daughter shared their first evening as a legal family. 3 weeks later, their peaceful routine was shattered. Sam was in the barn, tending to a mare who developed a limp, when Blue's frantic barking drew his attention. Through the barn door, he could see riders approaching. Not Jake Morrison this time, but strangers. Professional-looking men in dark suits, riding expensive horses. Catherine appeared at the kitchen door, her face pale but determined. She'd learned to read the signs of trouble as well as Sam had. "How many?" Sam called to her as he grabbed his rifle. "4. They don't look like drifters." Sam's blood chilled. Men in suits usually meant law enforcement or bounty hunters, both potentially dangerous given Catherine's situation. The lead rider dismounted with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being in control. He was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of mustache that suggested vanity and the kind of eyes that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. "Samuel McKenna?" the man called. "That's right. What's your business here?" "My name is Harrison Wells. I represent certain interests in California." Wells removed his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I believe you have something that belongs to my client." "I don't have anything that belongs to anyone in California," Sam replied evenly, though his grip tightened on his rifle. "Come now, Mr. McKenna. Let's not play games." Wells gestured toward Catherine, who had moved to stand beside Sam. "The girl was purchased in good faith by my client. Her transportation west was arranged and paid for. When she failed to arrive, we began making inquiries." "The girl has a name," Catherine said, her voice steady despite her fear. "It's Catherine McKenna, and I'm exactly where I belong." Wells smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Miss O'Brien, I understand you may have developed attachments during your time here, but a contract is a contract. You were promised to Mr. Aldrich in San Francisco, and he's quite anxious to meet his bride." "She's not going anywhere," Sam said flatly. "I'm afraid that's not your decision to make." Wells reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "This is a legal writ, signed by a territorial judge. It compels the return of one Catherine O'Brien to fulfill her contractual obligations." Sam took the document and scanned it quickly. It looked official enough, though he had no way of knowing if it was genuine. More importantly, it was made out for Catherine O'Brien, not Catherine McKenna. "This document is invalid," Sam said, handing it back to Wells. "I beg your pardon?" "It's for Catherine O'Brien. There's no one here by that name." Sam pulled his own document from his pocket, the adoption papers Reverend Morrison had prepared. "This is Catherine McKenna, my legally adopted daughter. As you can see, the adoption was completed 3 weeks ago." Wells examined the adoption papers with growing frustration, clearly recognizing that Sam had outmaneuvered him legally. But when he looked up, his expression had hardened. "Clever, Mr. McKenna. But my client has invested considerable money in this arrangement. He's not going to simply walk away because of a few pieces of paper." "Then your client is going to lose his investment," Catherine said firmly. "I never agreed to any marriage. I was sold without my consent, which makes any contract invalid. You were a minor without legal guardianship. Your uncle had every right to make arrangements for your future. Not anymore, Sam interjected. Now she has legal guardianship, and that guardian says she's staying right here. Wells studied them for a long moment, calculating odds and options. When he spoke again, his tone carried a subtle threat. Mr. McKenna, you strike me as a reasonable man. You've built a nice ranch here, established a good reputation in the community. It would be a shame if anything were to complicate that. Are you threatening me? I'm simply pointing out that men who interfere with legitimate business arrangements sometimes find themselves facing unexpected difficulties. Tax assessments, questions about land titles, problems with territorial licensing. Wells shrugged eloquently. The frontier can be unpredictable. Sam felt familiar anger building in his chest, the same rage he'd felt watching Jake Morrison threaten Catherine months earlier. But this time, he also felt something else, the absolute certainty that he would do whatever it took to protect his daughter. Mr. Wells, Sam said quietly, I suggest you and your men get back on your horses and ride out of here. Now. This isn't over, McKenna. Yes, it is. Sam raised his rifle slightly, not quite pointing it at Wells, but making his intentions clear. Catherine is my daughter now. That means she's under my protection, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Wells remounted his horse, his face flushed with anger and frustration. You're making a mistake, McKenna. My client has resources, connections. This won't end here. Then he'll have to go through me to get to her, Sam replied. And I promise you, that won't be as easy as he thinks. After the men rode away, Sam and Catherine stood on the porch in silence, both shaken by the encounter, but trying not to show it. How many more are going to come? Catherine asked finally. I don't know, Sam admitted. But it doesn't matter. We'll face whatever comes. What if they try legal means? Real courts, not just territorial writs. Sam was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then we'll get real lawyers. And if that doesn't work... He looked at her seriously. Catherine, how do you feel about the idea of leaving Wyoming? Leaving. But this is our home. Home is wherever we are together, Sam said gently. If staying here means constantly looking over our shoulders, constantly fighting people who want to take you away, maybe it's time to consider other options. Catherine looked out at the ranch, the garden she'd planted, the cattle they'd improved, the life they'd built together. The idea of leaving it all behind was heartbreaking, but the idea of being separated from Sam was worse. Where would we go? I've been thinking about that. I have a brother in Oregon. Haven't spoken to him in years, but family is family. He's got a spread up there, could probably use help. Or we could go to Montana, start fresh somewhere no one knows our names or our business. You'd really do that? Give up everything you've built here? Sam looked at her with the same expression he'd worn the day he'd given her his name. Catherine, you are everything I've built here. The ranch is just land and buildings. You're what makes it home. That night, as they sat by the fire making plans for a potential move, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the ridge above the house. Jake Morrison had been tracking Wells and his men, waiting for his opportunity. He'd heard enough of the conversation to understand that the girl was worth even more than he'd originally thought, and that she might soon be moving beyond his reach. As Jake rode back toward town, his mind was already working on a plan. If legal means wouldn't work, and if the girl was planning to leave the territory, then he'd have to act quickly. The $500 was still out there, waiting to be claimed. He just had to be smart about how he claimed it. Meanwhile, in the house, Sam was teaching Catherine to read maps by lamplight, showing her possible routes to Oregon and Montana. As her finger traced the lines that would take them away from everything they'd known, Catherine felt a familiar mixture of fear and hope. Dad, she said softly. Yes. Whatever happens, whatever we have to do to stay together, I want you to know that these months here have been the happiest of my life. Sam squeezed her hand gently. Mine too, daughter. Mine too. Outside, Blue settled onto the porch for another night of vigilant watching, his one good ear alert for any sound that might threaten his family. In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and somewhere in the darkness, dangerous men made dangerous plans. But inside the warm circle of lamplight, a father and daughter sat together, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as family. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered. The story of Catherine McKenna, the girl who had been bought for the price of a bottle of whiskey and had found in return a father's love, a home's warmth, and the fierce joy of belonging somewhere at last, was far from over. But the foundation had been laid, strong as stone and true as steel, built on the unshakable bedrock of chosen family and mutual devotion. In the morning, they would begin planning their future, whether that meant staying to fight or leaving to find peace elsewhere. But tonight, they were simply a father and daughter, safe in their home, surrounded by the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and love well given. It was enough. It was everything. If you made it this far, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our upcoming stories. Let us know in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. Your support motivates us to keep creating content like this. Thanks for joining us.